Welcome to the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. We're going to explore ways to sharpen our diagnostic skills, find learning resources, and hear from experts in the automotive field. Hey, what's going on, automotive world? Welcome to another episode of the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. My name is Sean Tipping, and I'll be your host once again for this week's episode. Joining me on the show this week is Brian Mann, mobile guy out of Cleveland, Ohio. Brian's been on the show before. I always enjoy getting to talk to him. He's got a wealth of knowledge in this industry. We're going to talk about how a large majority of the solutions to the diagnostic problems that we face out in the field that we're assisting shops with end up being very basic in nature, right? Majority of the time, it ends up being a fuse or a wire or a connection issue somewhere, right? The fix and the actual problem isn't anything earth-shattering. It's the same normal stuff that we've been seeing on cars, forever, right? The fuses, the wires, the circuits that are open or have high resistance. And that's been going on as long as there's been electrical circuits on cars, but we're still seeing that. Now, yeah, the systems have gotten more complex and there's a lot more variety out there of stuff, but it really all comes down to the basics. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about work-life balance and how sometimes we struggle to manage that. It was a great talk with Brian. Hopefully you'll enjoy this as well. Oh, and hey, I wanted to remind everybody too, Brian has a training website. It's handsonautotraining.com. He's got a bunch of training courses there with electrical troubleshooting, diagnostic videos. So make sure to check that out. I'll put the link in the show notes. But with that out of the way, let's jump in.
That's awesome. All right. So, well, how is the new guy going? You got the new technician with you?
It's very good. It is tremendous to have some help. Number one, doing the one-man show, as you know, can be extremely challenging at times. And I think one of the main reasons is the geography. You can't control where your calls come from. You can schedule the best you can, but hey, if I have a call on either side of town and that's what I have to do today, that's it. But with two people, you can work with that a little better and say, okay, you're on the north side today, I'm on the south side, and you get to more jobs just for that alone. So that's been fantastic, but he's doing good. I have him doing most of my programming. So GM, Ford, I'm still trying to get a second Nissan interface because that's I do more Nissans. I think it's probably a close third, Nissan and Chrysler, but I do so many Nissans. The CVTs, just almost every day it feels like. But anyways, he doesn't have a Nissan interface, but he has Ford, GM, Chrysler, and some Asian stuff for me. And then I'm easing him in on the diagnostics, and that's been probably the most challenging part. He picked up the programming, and we can work through a programming challenge with me not there a lot easier than a diagnostic difficulty that he's having. It's I got to be there to really see what's happening and what he's testing. But yeah, I'd say that's probably been the biggest challenge. Is he's coming from a shop, and he's a sharp guy. And he knows his stuff, but doing this mobile stuff is a different animal, and you got to have a different mindset because a shop, you can order a part and you can try it out and you don't have to screw over the customer. You just say, okay, this didn't work, get me the next part. But doing mobile, we got to make that right call. We got to tell them this is what it is and that's what it's got to be. And so I'd say that's probably the one challenge that I've been working through. But if that's it, I'm happy as a clam. It's been great.
Oh, that's great. I'm keeping my eyes open for the right person in Cleveland. I'm really, You know, if you were to go back 2.5, 3 months ago, I was like, I need somebody right now. And then it kind of slowed up a little bit. You know, business goes up and down. And it's kind of like I'm just, you know, I'm not marketing. So, you know, if I really put the screws to it, I'm sure I can take some money from the big name players that have come to town. I guarantee I would. And accept it as a challenge if you're listening. So, because there's some stuff going on, man. It's like, come on. But anyways, you know, if I find the right person, I'll plug them in and get them going. I know I mentioned it before. I brought a guy up from like zero automotive in 2 years. It wasn't right away. It took 2 years. He was running circles around most technicians as far as diagnostics. I mean, he could read a diagram, use a multimeter, scope if he had to, which was rare. Usually, you know, and I was even the person that was on a kick 10 years ago saying, you know what, I can use my multimeter for most things. And it's still true. But sometimes I've learned, man, get the scope out, you'll see the problem right away real fast. And I'm not talking about communication, fault, bus problems, issues like that. But, you know, it really is. If you find the right person, you can bring them up or help them along the way. And not that what I do is perfect, because I'll be the first one to tell you I overlook stuff. And, you know, even today I got my tail handed to me. Just looking at some, I mean, it's a code on a Kia or a Hyundai. What was it? A Hyundai Elantra today. It's a P0017. It's a simple, basically saying the exhaust camshaft isn't doing what it's supposed to. And I'm monkeying around for a long time. And I mean, I'm scoping the cam crank signals. I don't see anything. I'm unplugging a solenoid. I'm commanding a solenoid. It works. I'm like, man, what the heck? You can drive it. You can go around a block. It won't set a code. You can drive around the block the next time, you know, and there'll be no codes. You can start it up the next time. There's no codes. It'll sit there and run for a minute or 2, 3 minutes, no codes. You just sit there and put it in the gear and drive it across the parking lot. It'll pop the code. I'm like, oh, man. And I found out the shop says it came, oh, yeah, this thing came in like the oil light was on and it had no oil in it like a month ago. I'm like, well, that's good information to know. So now I'm wondering if an actuator could have got scored and just hanging up the actual phaser, not the actuator solenoid, but the phaser.
Sure.
I don't know if that's possible or, well, anyways, I got, you know, solid 2 hours into it. And I was trying to film that one. I got my whole little YouTube gig trying to, I'm trying to do stuff more live, or should I say, I don't want to have to edit besides just chop it up and edit, not have to do anything major. Just basically, here it is. Oh, look, here's 3 minutes of silence when I went to go to the restroom, or I went to go talk to the customer, or whatever it was, and it is chop that, boom, boom, put it together. I'm trying to get my daughter to do my video editing. She's been doing the last few videos, so it's cool. Okay. But, you know, it's always usually basics. If I know, I've been listening to your podcast. I love what you do. Keep it up. It's great work for our industry. But the last 2 weeks have been diagnostic jobs that, for the most part, have been basic things. I mean, I'm talking, we're going back to the basics. That's all it is. Voltage drop testing. That's all it is. And I've heard you say that before. And why are we missing this? I mean, heck, and I got to lift my hand up and raise my hand and say, hey, why did I miss something or whatnot? I just had a driver's door module on a Ford Fusion, like a 16 or 17. I did make a video of it to post to the YouTube the other day. And, you know, it was supposed to be programming, and then, of course, programming didn't fix it. It was a LIN bus problem. So my thought right away is like, oh, a LIN bus. Let me get my U-scope out, because that's the perfect tool for a LIN bus problem, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to figure out where this LIN bus is. I poke around, and I find the LIN bus, and I'm like, the pattern looks the same all the time, no matter what's going on with the vehicle. I mean, it's kind of repeatable, almost like knock, knock, who's there, knock, knock, who's there. I'm like, all right. And it ended up being a blown fuse to the driver's door switch, which is a 3-wire switch. It's a power, a ground, and LIN bus. I take that back. I don't know if it was a blown fuse. The fuse block is very difficult to get to. And I told the customer, I was like, we got a blown fuse, a bad power, whatever. He's like, I'll find it from here. How much do I owe for now? And I'm like, okay, that's cool. I'm fine. I jump some power. Everything works. But yeah, it's simple stuff, man.
Yeah, that's the majority of fixes that come down to something that is simple and that can be tested simply, but it's like navigating your way through the complexity to get there. And yeah, of course, you run into those really oddball ones. Like you say, intermittents, of course, are going to be difficult. I find mechanical issues to be very challenging because, well, I'm not going to be the one tearing into this thing. So what can I do with my test methods? And I don't know. There just seems to be like a gray area sometimes with the mechanical side of things where it's not with electrical. Like electrical, it's set in stone. This is the way it is. If you miss something, it's because you missed something or you didn't test it right. Like electrical's not gonna do something that it's not supposed to do. But with the mechanical side of things, it's just like, oil pressure and stuff like that. That could get really tricky to nail down without taking stuff apart. I've definitely run into that scenario before. I don't know how many mechanical or like drivability issues do you get like that?
I get a fair amount of stuff where when you're talking about mechanical, I almost break it down as to stuff I'm not going to get into, whether it's mechanical or, hey, I'm not taking the front pan off that GM 6-speed to go digging to see what's not hooked up inside there.
Right.
I mean, if they really want me to, I might. As you see, I got a little wrist brace on. I got some pain in my hands, so it's like I'm just getting kind of the point. It's like if I can't do it easily, you can do it for me. But I see, I'd say maybe 30% of the stuff I see is kind of like, well, I guide the shop in the right direction, and they're pretty happy usually if I can guide them properly. Right. And that's my goal, of course, not to mislead anybody, but go back to this Hyundai today. It's like, well, it doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes they can drive it for a long time and light doesn't come on. Sometimes they start it and run it for a little while and then just go across the parking lot and the light comes on, sets the code as pending. I'm like, and I was scoping this thing, trying to catch it in the act. I'm like, man, I got an hour and a half into this thing, and I got a handful of nothing. I mean, really.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's the way it goes sometimes. I mean, I'm basically saying, you told me the engine came in with no oil in it. Could it be actuator that's hanging up? Maybe. Is there sludge somewhere? Of course, they've got new cam sensors, crank sensors, VCT solenoids. We got all the parts already hung on it. And it's like,
sure.
They're like, it can't be out of time. It can't be anything major because it's only got 60,000 miles. And I'm like, you told me it had no oil in it.
Yeah, that changes things.
I just had speaking of mechanical stuff, I just had I think it was 2 days ago, Monday. Yeah, I think it was Monday afternoon, early evening, 2011 F-150 3.5 EcoBoost, right? Mm-hmm. 70,000 miles on an auction car. They're like, this thing barely runs. And I'm like, well, I don't know what's going on. And I'm like, what codes are setting? Well, it's got all these cam sensor circuit codes. I'm like, oh, really? You start getting into it. Just because it says circuit doesn't mean the circuit's bad. It actually is out of time. I go to do a cam, what do you call it, a relative compression test with IDS, and it's kicking me out saying I can't do it because there's a cam cranksync problem. And I did end up scoping it out, and I'm like, yeah, this thing's way out of times. I mean, it's like, I don't know how many degrees are on the teeth, but I'm like, this thing's, on my scope, it's a few inches. You're way out, buddy.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. I mean, that's not a very accurate thing, but it's like, hey, this thing is not right. So I'm not taking it apart. I can tell you that right now. The thing needs changing guides and everything else.
I had a BMW the other day that was circuit codes for both of the camshaft sensors, but it was because the camshafts weren't moving, and so the computer was kind of right. Like the circuits were not changing in that set of circuit code, but it was very mechanical that caused it. So,
well. Yeah, well, that's interesting. And, I love what you talk with Rich Falco, and just listen to you talk about your diagnostic process or trying to develop one. And I think it really comes down to that big question of if we can ask the right questions, we'll be so far along the diagnostic path. Yeah. And sometimes I find that's what I'm challenged to share with other technicians. Like if I go into a shop and they're just totally like, in my opinion, like right off the bat, I'm kind of like, oh, I'm to the left and you're way far to the right or whatever, or I'm up, you're down. I don't care which way you want to put it. I'm like, they're looking over here, I'm looking over there, and they're like, why would you go there? I'm like, well, because because this, and this. And maybe that's part of, I think that's part of my experience. Not that I know that much. I mean, I'm learning every single day, let me tell you. But just saying, hey, I have this experience already that I know if I don't have a check engine light on and I have a flashing theft light, I'm not replacing starters. I mean, I'm not going that route. I'm going to be checking something else. And I'm trying to figure out, how do you get somebody to ask the right questions? Because you ask the right questions, like say this Hyundai to kick my tail today. I'm over there asking, well, why is this code set? I look at the code criteria. It's got to be more than 15 degrees out of what it think it should be for 80 revolutions of an engine. And that's why I got the scope up. Maybe I could see that, 15 degrees should be significant enough, but then again, I'm looking at what it's commanding and all that stuff, and I unplugged the solenoids. I'm looking at known goods, everything's in time. I'm like, man, it's got to be like commanding it a little bit, and I'm just missing it. Even with my scan tool recording, I think it's missing frames where I can't see it, and I don't have it on the scope, so it's getting hung up, and it's say, hey, I should be over here, but actually, we ran for a few seconds over here, and that's all it takes. But why? One of the great challenges I had in the past 2 weeks was a 18 Pacifica. It's got an engine start stop system on it. It was a no crank at a shop. I'm like, oh, no crank, that's easy, right? And I get looking at the diagrams, and I'm poking around. I'm like kind of confused. I won't lie. I looked at the diagram. I'm like, why do we have to have 3 relays to control the starter? I mean, 3 different relays have to be on, or 2 have to be on. We got our powertrain control, or what do you call it, battery power relay.
I was looking at a Chevy Cruze cooling fan relay. Just like what are you doing? It's one fan.
Exactly. There's a lot of stuff going on there, and I'm looking at the diagram for the starter. So I'm just like, let's take it back. I mean, I know how a starter works. You got a big wire, we got a little wire. We got to have power to the little wire. Where does that little wire come from? It comes from relay. Well, how does that relay get turned on? We have to have a difference in potential, or difference in voltage, or should I say a voltage drop happening across that primary side of the relay to make that thing click on. And, how does that happen? I'm looking at the diagram. The diagram threw me for a loop. And I actually diagnosed the vehicle. I found I located a high resistance, or what I would call a voltage drop under a load in the power distribution center. Big underhood fuse block. Fine, that's great. I still went home and I couldn't figure out for the life of me how the system worked. And I ended up making a call to Identifix next day. I'm just like, hey, I just want to talk to somebody. I'll pay to talk to somebody about how does this system work. And the guy's looking at the diagram. He's like, this doesn't make any sense. I'm like, I agree. And we poked around, all data, Identifix, MotoLogic. They all got it all wrong. I didn't check Mitchell's. Stellantis has it wrong on the Chrysler site because I went there. Move up to 2019, the diagram makes sense. Move back up to 2020. The diagram's bad again. It's like, you got to be kidding me. Even the manufacturer. So I emailed Stellantis saying, hey, just to maybe save your technicians a hassle and everybody else, please fix this.
I had that same thing on a Ford. I don't know. It was the alternator circuit, and the diagram is wrong in the service information. It's just, you have to go a year up. And I mean, the year is the year. I'm sure it was some split year or something like that, but it was just wrong and wasted a ton of time because the wire colors were like kind of the same, but they didn't go to the same place. And so it's just a huge waste of time until we realized like something doesn't make sense here. What is going on? And then you figure out, oh, okay, this is the wrong diagram. I think, I was thinking a lot about the whole process thing after talking to Rich, and like, how do you, help somebody else with that? How do you teach that? How do you get that in someone else? Of course, they got to want to do it, but if somebody wants to do it, how do you get that across? And I think one of the biggest points where people's processes break down, from what I see, is they get to a point where they don't understand the component or even able to break it down into simpler components. And at that point, they need to march on with the fix. They need to keep going. And so now they're just replacing parts, or you're going after completely blind. But you got to like stop yourself there and say, okay, I don't understand this. Can I break it down into simpler parts and understand it? Like that diagram, like I understand a starter. Can I branch out from there and try to, I was doing that with the relay system on the cooling fan for the Cruze today. You look at it and you're like, holy shit, there's a lot going on there, but it's one motor and they run it through some resistors to change the speeds. But can I break it down into smaller sections that I do understand and then grow it out from there? Okay, well, now it's complex, but I understand the scenario and I can keep going with my process. But if I skip over that and don't understand what's going on, good luck. Good luck.
That's that's exactly how I felt with that Chrysler when I was looking at the diagram and it didn't make any sense. I'm just like, wait a minute. It just threw me for a loop. And I like to think that having a basic understanding of how basic things work, just basic load or whatever in a circuit, has helped me so much as a technician. But when I rely on that and then go to faulty wiring diagrams is where I'm like, whoa, it doesn't make any sense. I had I think it was an 18 or 19 E-Series 450, like a box truck or something, that had a terrible mass airflow sensor diagram. It just didn't, it was false. It was improper right from Ford. Garbage.
Yeah.
Throw it out the window. Scott Brown was on one of my little things I was doing, and he's like, that's just an intern, the summer job intern. It really doesn't even understand anything about electricity. You got the job to write the diagram. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, because it's almost like if we follow a flow chart, not always, but many times, if you take the time to follow a flow chart, there will be times that the car doesn't get fixed. That's a fact. Other times, I like to see what they want us to test and what they're testing. And I love when we have a description operation. That's the best. Or code setting criteria, like I've heard you say it, but just like that Hyundai, I know for a fact if it's more than 15 degrees out of what it thinks it should be, and it runs 80 revolutions at that, it will pop that code. So I know that's happening. I just don't know what the computer is desiring, and I'm trying to I wish I could sync my scope to my scan tool. Does that make sense? I wish I could. That would probably find a problem, but it's like, man, what am I doing wrong, or whatever. But yeah, being able to understand a system and have good information to link it to is huge. But yeah, following a flowchart, it's gotten me in trouble before. That's a fact. And I know other technicians, well, I got to replace it with a known good computer, and the dealer's the only people that have one. Well, don't do that just yet.
Yeah. It's like you said, it's good to look through there and see what they want you to test. And Ford, I find myself doing that a lot on trouble codes, because I would say they generally don't have great code setting criteria and stuff like that, but they'll have their pinpoint tests. You run through it and get an idea of, okay, this is what the computer's looking at to set this code. And now I can utilize a flowchart, or I can go test the components I need, but I got to understand. And it comes back to that again. I have to understand, what is the computer unhappy about, right? There's something. Do I understand it, right? Is it, the cam circuit thing, is it really a cam circuit, or is there a possibility it could be from revolutions within a certain time period?
It's not seeing what it wants to see. It might be seeing a signal, but it doesn't line up where it's supposed to, and I guess that's their criteria.
Yep. And that computer strategy, myself included, is where we get hung up on a lot, because you don't have an answer. How does this computer react in this scenario? Or why is it doing what it is in this scenario? And sometimes you don't have an answer,
Sean, you're absolutely right with the the Ford. It seems like their pinpoint tests I've had a couple times, and I'm trying to think. I think it was a Transit Connect, maybe a 12 or 13. It was a no crank situation, and I really didn't. I can't remember what the fix was. It doesn't really matter. But basically, I was kind of like, I don't know why this doesn't crank. I'm looking around, and it turned out that just I followed a pinpoint test to a T, and I don't remember what it was. I probably got a YouTube video I made on it, but whatever, I forgot. But I know for a fact, if it wasn't for the pinpoint test, I would have been up there with, I wouldn't have hung a starter, because I understand how a starter works. I know if we don't have battery positive to the little one and battery positive to the big one and ground, it's not going to crank. I get that. But for whatever reason, this thing wasn't cranking. I wish I could remember, but the pinpoint test was like, well, check this. I'm like, wait a minute, that data pin was bad. and it leads you exactly where to go. So not all flowcharts are bad. That's not what I'm saying. And I try and tell people, if you're less experienced, and sometimes I got to back myself up too, but if you don't know what you're looking at, read the flowchart, take the time to understand at least what they want you to test. I just don't like it when they get us to the point of unplug the first step, unplug the computer. I think you were doing a Toyota or something Prius, or unplug this, and check. And then you read down, you go through that flowchart, and you might find a really, why would they have me test this data pit or test this? I can actually do that right now. Perfect. Yeah. Let's do that. I like easy, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of get a feel for what their direction is, and then you can make some decisions yourself on, okay, based on my experience, I think maybe we'll go this route first. I mean, sometimes it's just pure laziness. Sometimes like, I don't want to do that yet, so I'm going to do the easy thing first.
Yeah. The last thing I feel like doing is finding some splice pack that's underneath the passenger seat. But, I mean, if I sit in the passenger seat and stomp on the floor and whatever network goes crazy or something, well, okay, I'll probably have to dig up that wet carpet. But, I mean, I really aim. I think anybody else here that's mobile, I mean, even technicians at a shop, of course we want to do the easy thing first. I mean, Brandon Steckler always calls it the low-hanging fruit. I love that idea. It's like, hey, there's some easy things you can check that gives you a lot of diagnostic knowledge and what I call direction. I'm not too proud to admit that I got my tail handed to me, and I say tail handed to me because I spent an hour on a thing or 45 minutes, like a 15 Jeep Grand Cherokee. Turned out the guy at the shop actually got sick or something. I don't know what happened, but he was in the middle of diagnosing it, and he already hung a they called it a TIPM, but this was actually a power distribution assembly, and they said it needed to be per. I'm like, no, that's not a TIPM. If the vehicle has a BCM, it doesn't have a TIPM, is kind of how I judged that. Mm-hmm. And I get there, it's set in a P0688. That's an ASD circuit code. I'm like, that should be simple. But, I kind of went down. I had to put some parts together. He had a part. He had, like, connectors off the body control module. I was digging around. So put everything back together, and I got a 688. And, Sean, I lost one of the first steps I should be doing. Anytime I'm using my multimeter, I hook one lead to ground at the battery, preferably. I say that. I preach that, but I don't always do it. But, I like to have it at the battery negative. Boom, check the battery positive. What's the next thing I like to do? Take that lead and jam it into the block. Or a cylinder head or whatever. What am I expecting? Really low voltage. Well, if I would have taken the time to do that, but I got sidetracked. I'll be the first one to tell you, I was sidetracked. If I would have taken the time to do that, Sean, I would have found out that a key off. Why do we have 150 millivolt drop between battery negative and the block? That doesn't sound right. Oh, look, turn the key on, it's 6 volts. Oh my goodness. I just a lot of time.
Yep. No, I've been there too. You skip over the simple basic stuff. Trying to, you get the tunnel vision on a certain code or certain system or whatever, and you kind of skip over that stuff. Basic, just like battery stuff and connections and things like that. So you got to keep that all in mind, because like we said, so much of the time is a simple thing that's causing the reasons I get called into places. Like, so many wires, so many just corroded terminals, loose terminals. The female end is spread out. Like none of it's like wild crazy. Okay, yeah, we get one of those every once in a while, and it's fun to talk about. But most of my diagnoses end up as, hey, it's broken wire, it's a fuse, it's a terminal. That's it.
Yeah, it's almost like this shouldn't be that complicated for the shop, at least I like to say. But then again, I think Rich said, well, hey, we're going, I used to think that we got to elevate everybody, or how did he say that? But he's talking about, basically we all should be better than this, but it's like, no, there's shops that, in some shops just get by and they don't care. I guess they hang a bunch of parts, make their money, and on their way to go. But then when they got to pay a mobile guy X dollars or whatever, or X amount per hour for 2 hours because we had to put together everything that everybody else screwed up when he replaced all the parts, that's a big deal. Well, if you wouldn't spend $2,000 over here, you wouldn't, blink an eye paying us whatever over there,
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I don't tell any of my shops, but I would look at it as business owner. Okay, I've paid for this guy to come out X times within a month for diagnostic work. How much would it cost to send my guys to some training or something? And yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. Do they want to learn? What's the training available? And I understand that, but man, I would be looking at it like, what can I do to elevate my technicians to be able to do some of this?
Yeah, I spent $1,000 in a month for somebody. I'm already paying somebody X amount, or more, right? Yeah. And we could, if I could fix this problem, keep this in house and he'd get the bigger part of the pie at the end of the month, I guess. But I get employed by a lot of shops that, it is what it is. Mm-hmm. That's just interesting.
Part of it's the convenience factor too. Like it's seamless, or I try to make it as seamless as possible for the shop. And that I know is part of the appeal of what I offer is that you call me, I come, I tell you what's wrong with the car. You pay me. You don't have to do anything else. I have to fix the car, but it is painless for them. And that's, they get a taste of that and okay, I'm busy, I'm stressed out, I got too much work, just call Sean. He'll just come figure it out,
One of my best customers has a technician that I look up to in certain ways. I mean, he's a smart guy. Now, I know maybe I have more experience and I say I know more about networks and, whatever, CAN bus or something like that than this guy. But this guy's a smart guy. I mean, like if I'm working on, I think I was working on a 94 motorhome and looking at some circuits or whatever with the thick film ignition distributor or whatever. And he's like, oh, yeah, pip spout, start, run, coil, ground. I'm like, yeah, I learned that once too. He knows that like the back of his hand, man. He can get in there and do whatever or, give him a carburetor, and he's the guy, smart guy. But they found it's better to let that guy do timing chains and engines or whatever he's doing, or maybe tune-ups and whatever the guy's doing, head gaskets or something like that. And they'd rather keep him on that and then call me in. And I'm like, did you guys even scan this? No, just we got 3 check engine lights for you. Can you get down here real quick? And I'm like, okay. You know what I try? That's okay, whatever. I'm like, I almost feel like it throws me off of my game when I go there and they didn't scan it. I'm used to going to shops 90% of the time. They've already put a bunch of parts on there. It's like, well, unless it has the wings on there, I'm not so worried about these parts. It's probably not a part. It's probably going to be a wire, and we find it. Just like I think last episode you were talking about the fuel pump control module with the wake up signals. I've been having a handful of those lately, and it's like, hey, we got to have power here too, and just a lot of modules and parts. And it's a corroded wire in between. I mean, I am happy that I live in a Rust Belt. And, I mean, not because it gets cold, but because, I'm telling you, I can't imagine. Like, I think a lot of the money I make is from corroded wires. I mean, all day long.
Oh, yeah. There's so much of that. And, I mean, you just expect it to be in the circuit of, car that's X amount of years old. Or when I get into a car, I look up, there's a sunroof. Okay, it's like
I know where I'm looking,
and I can get tunnel vision that way. Sometimes I definitely have. Like I really got to tear this carpet up when I don't need to, but like I got to know. Okay, this thing's got a sunroof, and that probably is more than just Minnesota, but there's lots of corrosion and stuff, and I have to consider that's where I'm headed with this thing. Or here's the other thing, and I run into this every once in a while. If there's a rust hole in the floorboard, that's another way for water to get in pretty easily. So I've had a couple of those before where I can, that's the ground. Okay.
I get a lot of the F-150s old, well, I don't know what year. I'm trying to think. Not older, still what I call the newer body style. What is that, 97 or 96? I don't know. But that style newer, when he went from the square
You're
body
aging yourself there.
I feel it too. But yeah, those ones, man, the floor rots out by the A-pillar and those grounds. I got a video on one of those, and it's like, holy cow, there's 4 volts there. That's not good. That's causing all kinds of mischief,
Yeah. I think I have a picture of like I could see my hand on the bottom side underneath there on one of those.
That's interesting, and how do you? I guess I'm asking the audience, how do you think about your process and what you do and how you decide which way to go?
Yeah.
And why? I mean, if you don't understand how the system works, it's like, I think the one ground I had on one of those Fords, I've made a lot of videos and stuff on this stuff on the YouTube, but man, it's like, oh, I'm over there thinking everything's acting like I got a major power issue, right? Well, I did have a major power issue. Power is work getting done. We got to have current flow to get that work done, right? I didn't have any current flow because I had a bad ground. I'm over there checking the ignition switch because I got a new ignition switch and it's right there. I'm testing that. And, all of a sudden it's like, oh, whatever. I think I had to take a step back. Oh, my theft light is on, right? Or no, I had no communication with the theft module, I think is what the code was setting in the PCM. It did communicate, and theft module's easy. I like this. It's only got like a power, a ground, and I think was like 2 comm wires, the RX and TX or whatever. I'm like, let's check the power. Oh, power's good. Oh, ground? How do I have 4 or 5 volts on that ground? That can't be right. That led the way. It's just like take a step back, find what is the easiest thing. Sorry about that. What is the easiest thing to get to and access and test? And it often just leads you there.
That's the thing, is having a test method to prove things out as well, right? You got to understand how it works, and then you have to actually do a test, but you have to have a test method that you're confident in the result means something to you, right? This is okay, or no, I need to move on. And that's another huge part of any process, is whatever you're doing, how are you going to test it? And I'm challenged with that all the time, because on a regular basis, I see stuff that I've never seen before. And so I'm like, can I apply a test I already have to a similar or older system, or is this something completely different? And sometimes that's the tough question, right? I'm like, is this different than what I'm used to? Because it's on a different brand, but it's kind of the same. Can I test it the same? That's a tough one to answer at times, but that's the key, right? If you have a test that proves it for you with certainty, it's and you follow that, it's easy, right? Yep, this is bad. Nope, this is good. I'll keep going. But for me, I had an episode about it. I'm like, I kind of run out of test methods that really are conclusive. And now what do I do with that? And lack of knowledge on my part, lack of information, just lack of a good test method to prove it out. But that's the goal, is to keep working, I guess, keep gaining as many as possible,
Yeah, I mean, I find that the testing methods is changing as the vehicles are changing. I mean, there's only certain things that we can have the super basics to apply, but then even some of those are fluid depending on the situation with the car. I mean, I'm trying to think of an example that I had in my head, but it just went away, how that goes. But what I'm getting at is like, I mean, the cars are changing. So, we can't just say, this is how you test an ignition system or whatever. I mean, you got to watch out, or, be careful with that, right? It doesn't work. But as we learn a little bit about a system, I found that I like what you said in your last episode about proving something. I personally like to have 2 fingers to point at something. I like to be able to say, boom, I found this, now I'm going to pinpoint it. I'm going to get, what else can I do to back myself up? And many times, I'm not saying this is the right way, and I always tell people, do not go messing around with jumper wires unless you know what you're doing. And you'll even see me 99% of the time, I got a fuse jumper. I'll put a 10 amp fuse on a jumper wire because I really don't want to blow nothing up or cause myself more problems. So,
right.
Hey, I think that Chrysler with the wrong diagram. I'm like, I know this fuse is supposed to power this thing, but I couldn't prove it. Or I didn't know, but I knew if that fuse is hot, the other part of the circuit should be hot. And this is impossible to show you right through a podcast here. So I'm like, wait a minute, I think this is what's wrong here. I got a voltage drop between these 2 points, between the fuse and a relay within the PDC or power distribution center. Well, how do I back that up? Well, I'm going to jumper power between here and here, and all of a sudden the vehicle cranks. Well, I should say try to crank. They hit a locked up motor, had a new starter, they blew a 500 amp fuse. I mean, this thing was a mess. But anyways, I mean, how do you blow a 500 amp fuse? That's impressive. But this thing was a wreck in that sense. But you get two things to point to it, and or point the finger here, and how are you going to back it up? I was going to ask you. I just got done listening to your latest podcast on the when you mentioned about disproving or prove something, but then unprove it or work backwards from it. I think that's really interesting. I don't know if you care to share a little bit more about that with me or the audience.
Yeah, It's probably honestly like a self-confidence issue or something like that. But when I get to a conclusion, me personally, Sean, I'm like, how can I prove myself? I have to prove myself wrong because I don't think this is right. So how would I prove myself wrong? I've come to this conclusion. My mindset and my process has gotten me to, it's a computer. It's the CCM. So what it is like trying to step back, like outside of the moment, and say maybe I'm coming in and like I'm the original tech, and now someone else is coming in. How would they disprove that this is the answer and this is the case? And it just might shift your perspective slightly to say, well, if this, isn't the issue, we should be able to test this, and we'll test this way. And it doesn't always work, but I like to at least give myself that thought. If it's not a concrete thing, modules are a real common example of that, where it's like, yeah, I'm pretty certain, but there's always a chance there could be something else causing it to do what it's doing. Okay, well, how would you prove that out or disprove that the module's at fault? Could you simulate something? Could you remove a circuit somehow? And that gets into so many different unique examples. And again, the hard part of teaching this process, because there's so many unique individual examples of this stuff that you can't teach everybody. You can't teach everybody all of it because none of us knows all of it. And so what do you bottle that to hand somebody to use for every situation? It's tough.
It's very tough. I have a shop that I teach. I mean, they contract me or whatever to go in like once every 2 months or whatever and work with the guys. And they called me up telling me to program a used computer on I think it was a Buick Verano or something. It was a Global A car. And I'm like, listen, here's a story. Here's what I recommend or don't recommend. And, of course, I got to use one. They said all the numbers match. I get there. And, well, actually, the original computer, I could not get to get a read with I/O. I'm like, interesting. And the part numbers didn't match. I'm like, I think this is going to be a sketchy one. And the technician walked over to me, and he starts telling me, the computer is not providing power to the main, to the big, one of those big terminals. Or if you look at those computers, they got the big ground, big power on the connector or whatever. And I'm like, the computer doesn't make that power. The computer's consuming that power. That's the main input that's going to, run whatever the computer runs, the ECM. So right at that point, I'm like, hey, let's toss this thing back in there. Forget about trying to find a way to get this thing to communicate. I couldn't talk to the original computer. I could talk to the junkyard one with I/O terminal, but I couldn't get it to, the S1, 2, 3, 4 would just air out or something. Like, dang. So anyways, put the thing in the vehicle, and they're like, yeah, see, as it just runs just a short period of time, and all of a sudden, you'll start hearing relays click, and it'll stall out. And you look at the voltage there on that wire, it's actually bouncing around. Well, that was a tough one to diagnose, and I cannot tell you that I diagnosed it because I'm like, well, wait a minute, are we having a power mode issue? And I'm trying to look at that information, and I had another job to get to. I was thinking if this was going to be a quick program, of course. Well, now it's not. Yeah. And all this clickety clack going on underneath the hood. I'm like, what the heck's going on here? And I'm trying to figure out. Well, the computer controls the power, the relay, the primary side of that relay that puts power there. But is the computer not seeing something else, say from BCM or ignition switch input, or which is push button start? Right? I think it was a push button start. I don't remember. No, it might have been keyed, but whatever it may be, what's going on here?
Yeah. And
we found out that he's like, well, if it just sits for a little bit, it'll start up and it'll run again. I'm like, well, go take that computer, put it in the fridge, I'm like, what? I'm like, or go get a can of Freon or, whatever. Hey, whatever you guys want to do. I didn't say that out loud, did I? Anyways, so they popped that thing in the fridge and they wrapped it. They wrapped it in like a damp towel or wet towel or whatever. And the thing ran for like 45 minutes. They take the towel off, put the towel back in the fridge. The car's still running. Like 15 minutes later, the car stalls. Clickety clack, and just leaving the key on. They said they told me this on the phone. Clickety clack, all this stuff. Take that wet towel that's really cold from the freezer, wrap it around the computer, and it goes away. I'm like, well, I think you need a computer, and we ended up programming a computer, fix it right up. And I mean, that was an instance where I didn't have a diagnostic process. I was in a hurry, but I'm just looking at what did I do. I was just thinking, well, what causes this, or when does it happen? You know, we always got to have the when, how, why, all those questions answered. But I was just like, when does it happen? I'm like, well, let's just go back to super basics. And, you know, I think you got a heat related issue. And, you know, I was watching the computer turn off that relay, because at first I'm like, maybe could a relay be going bad as it gets hot or something? I don't know. But it's like, how do you teach that stuff? And the poor guy was on there. I mean, he's a good kid. He wants to learn. And I say kid, anybody younger than me is a kid, right? But he has an ambition to learn. And I told him, I was like, I don't have a clear path on which way I go about this, on this, whatever it was, a 14 Verano or something like that. Which way would I go? I don't know.
Yeah.
I got to see that relay. Why is that relay turning off? Is the computer inputs going? I was looking with the scan tool. I was trying to use their scan tool, which I was not familiar with, and that's a Brian problem, not a shop. You know, that's not anybody else's problem. Mine. I'd probably be using my Autel or my GDS2, and it was interesting. But I'm like, hey, let's just try and, you know, what does it take to make this thing mess up? And it's like, it's heat related, you know. I guess that's to prove, disprove, and the new computer, you know, we ran a thing. I was there wrapping up, the thing ran for 30 minutes with the hood shut. I'm like, oh, it's fixed.
Nice.
You know, it's good.
Nice. Well, here's one for you. This was just from today. I don't have a conclusion on this. I told the guy I got to come back. Chevy Cruze, 2000. Boy, I should have looked at that. I think it's 2014 Chevy Cruze with the 1.4 turbo. It was actually the relay I was just talking about with the cooling fan. So what this thing will do is, it seems to be cold only when the car's been sitting overnight. Once it's warmed up, it doesn't really do it. But you start the engine, starts fine, runs fine. The cooling fan is not on because nothing is commanding it to be so. No, your AC's off. The coolant's still cold, right? Shut the key off. The fan turns on. And it'll run for 10 minutes, I think, if you let it. But unless you cycle the key one more time. If you cycle the key one more time, the fan shuts off. That's fine. But if you just shut the key off, the fan runs for 10 minutes. Well, the shop came to the conclusion that it was an ECM. Because the ECM actually is commanding on the fan. And I verified that myself today. But they had originally called me to come clone a used one. So I did IO terminal, which is a little tricky on those cruises. If you do one with IO terminal, there's more than just copy paste. But I did it, and I did the first job not knowing what I was attempting to fix. And then he called me and said, "Hey, we still have the exact same issue. Can you come look at this thing?" So I went through my testing today, and I couldn't find a good reason for that PCM to be turning on that fan. I checked all the temp sensors, AC pressure sensor, everything, power modes. But for whatever reason, like when you shut the key off, the PCM stays awake and it turns on. It actually is turning on the powertrain relay that feeds itself. It's keeping that on and it's running the fan. And I need to look more into it, but I didn't have any answers. And that's one of those things where I'm like, in the moment, I was out of things I could test. I'm like, I looked at everything I could think of that would keep the PCM awake or command it to turn the fan on. I couldn't find any. And I'm like, also like, well, what's the key cycle about? How is that changing things? It's not like a stuck relay, or something like that. Like it's usually when I see that stuff, it's a module. It's some module that key cycle kills it. I had HVAC unit on a GM do something similar to that, but in the moment I couldn't find anything. So what do you do there? What would you?
Well, it seems like, I mean, what you're saying is like sometimes it's just more about learning about the system. I just pulled up the diagram for that cruise you're talking about. I'm like, why do we have 5 relays to control one fan?
One fan. I know. I looked at that this morning. I'm like, what?
That's ridiculous. I mean, this is just outrageous.
And when I saw that, I'm like, okay, one of these has to be like bad or something. And so I went through and verified, but no, the ECM in the data PIDs and on the circuit is commanding it's the number 1 relay, at least in the scan tool.
That's the KR20F, I think.
I think it's the one on the right of the diagram.
Right. Yeah, the cooling. Yeah. It says cooling fan relay, and everything else has some sort of speed: low speed, medium speed, fan speed. Wow. Well, that's just interesting, Sean. I mean, situations like that I think make us better when we get to the end of them. But it's all the time and effort that you have to put in between. I mean, what I'm getting at is it's like that Chrysler I had. It's like I literally came home. My wife, she's like, it's like it's 9:30. You've been looking at whatever you're doing on a computer. You've been doing that since 6 o'clock. I'm like, I don't understand how this works. And I'm like, it can't be that hard. I mean, rarely. I'm not trying. I mean, I'm not tooting my own horn, because if you have to print out a diagram and draw it out, that's a great method. It is fantastic. And usually I can just, I'll take a screenshot and I'll use my mouse and my snipping tool or whatever. I'll draw it out like that if I have to. Rarely do I even do that. But this thing, man, I have my kitchen table filled up with stitching the diagrams together. I'm like, how does this thing work? Yeah. So I mean, I think it's just about learning more about what the heck's going on and how does it work. I don't have an answer to how that works, Sean. I'll be the first one to tell you. Maybe
I was just curious on your mindset. If you were in that scenario, what would you be looking for?
I would be double checking. So you're saying that the powertrain control module is commanding the fan on with the key off.
Yes.
Now, how long can that powertrain control module command anything? I mean, is that doing something with the power moding options, or at what point does that powertrain control module go to sleep?
It does eventually. Like, I would say somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 minutes. I don't know if it's exact 10 minutes, like the power saving relay, but I had the door open. Okay. And I looked at the power moding data, and again, once you're away from the car, you're like, did I check everything? But what I saw, because GM breaks their ECM data groups into sections, you can go into the electrical theft data for the ECM. And I went through that, and everything that I could see, it had ignition switch voltage, and then it had something from the BCM, and that all was in an off state. But I'm talking to the ECM, and it shows powertrain relay on, fan on. Like, what the heck? So I don't know if I'm missing something, though.
Well, I mean, I don't know either. I guess one of the things at this point I'd be considering would be the description operation. And I'm poking around, literally. I'm looking around. I'm trying to find anything I can. But sometimes that'll give me a great deal of information. I'm like, now I get it.
Right.
Or I have an idea of how it's supposed to work, so I can kind of look at what I expect to see. I think that's one of the biggest things with our diagnostic testing is it's nice if you have a scope or a multimeter and you just want to poke around and learn. But when you're getting in, I mean, I guess when the metal meets the meat and you're in the heat of battle and you got to figure something out, it's more about understanding what to expect before you go and probe that. I want to be able to say, I expect to have this on my multimeter, then boom, jab whatever circuit or whatever I'm doing and have it or not have it and be like, oh, this is a problem. So yeah, in your situation, I got to learn more about how it works. I personally have not seen that diagram yet. I'm like, man, that's impressive. If you guys aren't paying attention, make sure you look it up. 14 Cruise 1.4 turbo cooling fan system. Holy smokes.
Talking about reinventing the wheel.
That's impressive. I mean, that's just overly complicated, but leave it to General Motors, I guess. That reminds me a long time ago, I think I did a head gasket either on a Sunfire or a Cavalier, going old school. And I started the thing up. I got my little funnel, or maybe I didn't even have a spill-free funnel, or what do they call them, but I was just filling up the radiator. Back in the day, that's how it was, is running this thing. We didn't have no vacuum sucker thing or whatever. And the cooling fans turn on. And I'm like, sweet, that's good, right? Hot air coming off there, running this thing, burping it. Kind of squeeze the hose a couple times, put the cap on. I go walk away, come back. I don't know what I did. Got distracted, come back, and cooling fan's still on. Okay, whatever. Put my hand down there. It's ice cold off the radiator. I'm like, what the heck? This is bad. I'm like, what the heck's going on? Turn it off, start it up, everything works right. Well, it's part of the thing. If it doesn't see vehicle speed, that's just logic. If it doesn't see vehicle speed, this is going back, 97, 98.
Okay.
I mean, if it doesn't see vehicle speed, that cooling fan will not turn off, which and that is written in the description operation somewhere I was at a GM dealer, and I learned that one. I'm like, what the heck's going on here? I mean, so that's why I think it's so important to understand how is it supposed to work.
Yeah.
But know that if you have like a 98 Cavalier and it's freezing cold outside and you actually get your cooling fan to kick on, you're going to lose heat in the vehicle. You will not have heat until you roll that thing forward or cycle ignition one time. Just cycle ignition.
I had a 98 Cavalier for a long period of time. I'll tell you what, everything working great, you still don't get very good heat in the dead of winter in Minnesota with a 98 Cavalier. When you're going 80 down the freeway and it's 40 below, it's just...
Gotta throw some cardboard out from that radiator, man.
I did. I had a big piece of cardboard I stuck up in there for the winter months.
I had a handful of Cavaliers myself. I had a 94, was a great car. I had that one for a minute. I mean, actually a long minute.
Okay.
I locked myself out of the place where the double I was renting. So I had to break into my own car. I stripped the column or whatever. I literally took a hammer, cracked it. The ignition switch is hanging down. Started with a pocket screwdriver. That's I like that. I did that for years. Met my wife and she still likes me. So, But I guess I mean I want to learn more about how that system works on that cruise. I mean that's really what it comes down to. Thinking about your situation and how do I handle that? It's like I don't like to be the guy that has to go home and read about it, but sometimes when I really don't understand the system, I can get more. I can expand my knowledge faster in the peace and quiet at home as opposed to a shop, because I'm at the shop and some of these shops, guys like, hey, what do you think about my car? Or do you have any roads for I got a, 96 Honda Accord. Can you program a remote for me? I'm like, dude, come on.
And then your personal phone's ringing and then your work phone's ringing and like, where was I again on this? That's it.
In the back of your head, you're like, I got 5 more stops I got to get to today. I mean, it's like, you got to roll. I mean, so I want to learn more about that system myself, but diagnostic process, understand the system is so important, in my opinion. Just start getting a general idea how it's supposed to work.
Yeah. Well, and getting away from the heat of battle to take it in, and that's where I got today. I was like, hey man, like I got to read up on this. I don't have a great answer for you. I got to go do my thing. I will research it, and I'm probably going to do that tonight once we're done. And, it definitely adds up sometimes though, right? Like you feel like, boy, this is all I do all the time, always.
Research and learn and go back and make a couple bucks. Will I ever see one of these cars again? That's the question.
Yeah, right. Chevy Cruze, I hope so. But it's like that specific problem.
What codes were set? And were any codes again? I forgot if you mentioned that.
No, nothing relevant. I did a scan. There was some low voltage codes, but the thing had been sitting and the battery was dead. So I chalked that up to that and they didn't come back. But otherwise there's no codes in the PCM that correlate and nothing else that I found relevant. But hey, sometimes those things you don't think relevant are once you get all the pieces of the puzzle together.
Absolutely.
But, I mean, what do you think about, spending a bunch of extra time outside of work to make this stuff happen? What's your feelings on that?
I've been really working harder, is that right? Proper English? I don't know. I've been working hard at trying to work on my life-work balance, and I'm still struggling. But a lot of times, many of the jobs I do, probably at least 70% of them do, that I have a diagnostic job. I kind of sit there and I will put my phone on mute and I try and, get in my zone where I'm looking up information and I'll try to do it there for a couple of reasons. First of all, sometimes the technicians can actually see what I'm doing and they care to watch. And I'll be like, well, listen, I'm kind of thinking pretty hard here, so you can watch what I do, but just give me a minute, So I got to figure this out for myself. And also, I get paid for it. There's no question about me getting paid for it when I'm there on site. It's not like I spend 2 hours at home and then go back and don't really charge much because I'm like, oh, boom, I found it. And, I kind of feel like maybe I should have found that yesterday. I try to be fair with myself, but I'm also trying to be fair with the shop because I get it. Certain things I don't think we can all know. There's no way. But I want to be better at learning how to find information, of course. I mean, that's it. So, there's been times when I'm like, 2 clicks away from what I need. There it was all that time. And I was clicking in the wrong tree or clicking in the wrong place, barking up the wrong tree, and just doing that. So I like to make it so I make one trip on my mobile gigs or whatever you want to call it. And many times I do that. Most of the time I do. But it happens where I don't, and then I'll go home and then have to make a second trip and, leave the ticket open or whatever or whatnot. But, many times at that point, it's more of I think that's where we get into the ego situation where it's like, hey, I got to fix this thing. It can't be that hard. I mean, like that Chrysler I worked on, it's like, it's a Chrysler, it's a Pacifica or whatever. It can't be that hard. I can figure this out. And of course we do. And did I get paid for the 3 hours or 2 hours I spent at home or whatever it was? I know I had a lot of time into it. And I even did an Identifix call after I built a customer call. I paid $40 just to talk to somebody about, because I'm losing I'm going crazy. And I'm like, I know a bunch of people on Facebook and you and yourself. It's like, I don't want to really pester somebody to take the time, because you know how it is if you don't understand something, the amount of time it takes you to digest the material, some people do it in 5 minutes, some people do it in 25 minutes, and I don't want to pester somebody to take 25 minutes of their day to really break it down and understand what's going on when I feel I should be able to do it myself. But so, did I charge that shop for that $40 Identifix call or whatever? Nope. That's all right, though. So that type of stuff happens. But the life-work balance thing's definitely important. I'm working on that. Trying to. It's been a busy week this week, between classes yesterday and Monday and us talking this evening. Tomorrow I do have on my schedule to go out and play some Frisbee golf or disc golf or whatever they call it. I'm on a league on Thursday nights, so that's fun. It's cool. It's a good walk in the woods, a good excuse to throw some discs at some trees and have a couple brews. So,
Yeah, you almost got to have something like that to kind of disconnect you from like this stuff. If you're like us and it kind of dominates, like you need something to just separate. You don't have your phone on you. Work people can't contact you. You're just doing something different. I actually started coaching at the gym that I go to, so I do that just a couple nights a week. But that's a really good one for me because, it's work, but I enjoy it. It's fun. I like actually working out and I like the people there, but my phone's away and I am in a completely different world and I guess kind of mindset at that point too. And you got to have something like that. Otherwise, for me, I know it'll just dominate everything.
I can easily, there's been times where I have so many projects that I want to be doing. I mean, whether it's learning something or working on my business or, something for the membership site or whatever. I got all these different things I play around with and do, or electronics projects. I love just basic electricity. I mean, AC circuits, RLC circuits, is playing with them, trying to learn how to make high pass filters and blah, 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 whatever. Why? I don't know, but I like it. But I can let that just totally dominate my life. And I find it having something that's not at all. I mean, it's like, nope, there's no voltmeters here. There's no scopes here. There's no Facebook. There's no whatever, all data, nothing. Boom. This is it. You go out and do something different. It's refreshing and good. Gotta have it, man.
Yeah. Well, and you had some health stuff in the last year go on. What was the deal there?
Well, first of all, I think the doctors misdiagnosed me, so we'll just leave it at that. But no, I think, looking
they didn't
back,
follow their process.
Well, and I'll tell you, I don't want to take a lot of time to talk about it, but yeah, I was in the hospital for, from a Monday afternoon to Friday afternoon. So, pretty much 5 days, almost 5 days in the hospital. I thought I was having a heart attack. I don't know what that feels like, but all I know is I don't go to the doctor or hospital unless I have an issue. And I'm like, I think I need to go now. You know what I mean? So I did go, and they scanned me. They told me I had a major blood clot, is what they told me right away in the ER, and treated me for that and did all kinds of tests. I got poked and prodded so many different ways. I'm sure I'm still getting the bills from that. But anyways, after a few days of this testing, and I was in good health, or should I say I was okay. I was like moving and physically okay, but they told me stay still, or don't overdo yourself or whatever, because you have the major. Basically, it was a low pressure blockage to the, or should I say, the low side of the pump had a blockage.
Okay.
That's what they told me, or the inlet to the pump, whatever. And they said if this thing breaks off, it's big news, or it's bad news. So I'm like, okay, fine. So they do all these testing. They had a brand new machine. What do they call it? 3D. I don't know if it was a CAT scan. I can't remember what type of machine. I don't know. But all I know is I could watch them, and they're testing. Like the machine still had a plastic thing on the screen, like a little, you peel it off. It's like, oh, this is brand new. I mean, I'm like, man, this thing must be like $1 million or something. And they didn't really say how much it cost, but they had the Philips representative teaching the technician how to use it, and they're like, are you comfortable here? I'm like, well, this is a whole lot better than being in my room. So they did the heart, you could see your valves open and all that stuff. It was like a full 3D. It looked real.
Wow.
I mean, as real as I could imagine. So that was interesting. But anyways, long story short, I've been yapping about it. They basically ran a test on Thursday, and I got there on Monday, and they're saying if this test come back negative or as a low score, there's no possible way you had a blood clot. I'm like, interesting. Why are you doing that now? Why didn't you do that the first day you told me I had a blood clot? So, guys, what I got to say is they came back like, hey, you don't have a blood clot. I'm like, well, what the heck? I'm like, that's me saying, well, your car doesn't start. It could be fuel pressure. Let me drop the pump and make sure the tank's clean and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to put it all up there and charge you $300 or $500. And by the way, we could do a quick test called a fuel pressure test, and or plug in a scan tool and watch the fuel rail pressure, and whatever, and then it's okay. So I don't know what the heck that was about, but the more I think about it, and I think it might have just been overstress, anxiety. I was in Denver, Colorado. Literally, I got back I think 7 or 8 o'clock that night. I was out 6 in the morning next day to go to work. You know how it is, and you're traveling back and forth, and I was tired. I didn't sleep well. And I think I was fatigued, stressed, blah, blah, blah. So it could have been just stress, man.
Sure.
And I almost feel weak saying, I must be a sissy or stressed. Oh, no, man, it beat me up, whatever it was. Whether it was a true something going through my body or not, I don't know. But so since then, I've really tried to not work as much. I know that sounds terrible, but I'm trying to say, hey, I'm going to put a slice of time for this project. And if I don't get it done, okay, I'm not doing it Saturday morning. If I don't get it done by 6 o'clock on Friday night, well, it's going to have to wait till Monday. And that's really challenging for me to do. My wife will tell you most times she'll be like, aren't you ever going to come upstairs? And, whatever. And it's like, and now I'm like, well, I guess I'm doing okay. I want to do a good job for the things I'm interested in, but also, is it so bad to sit there and watch a TV program, which I usually, say TV's like mind-numbing or whatever. It is. I don't really like TV, but I'd rather watch a YouTube.
It's good to numb out every once in a while.
It is. And now that the weather's nice by me, I mean, we don't have winters like you, but, definitely it gets cold here, cold enough to have salt on the roads, right? Just to do the Frisbee golf thing or whatever. It's like, hey, this is cool. It gets me out of the house. I play that every Sunday morning, but now there's a league, so I play Sunday mornings and I play Thursday nights, so that's cool. So nice. Working on a life balance thing. My wife, unfortunately, has been diagnosed with the breast cancer. Right after I got out of the hospital, like 3 weeks later, she got that diagnosis, and it's been a tough 3 months, but the good news is I think she's winning. The surgery, she's doing radiation treatments every day now, and she's got some other stuff going on, so no chemo. They decided that would be probably better age, probably not the best thing for long term, but it's like, stuff like that makes you step back and be like, you know what, fixing cars is kind of what I do. It's how I make my money. I like it. I like to think that I'm improving at my skill. That's my goal, because I don't know it all and I got so much to learn. I like to help others, but also this is not is that really the main thing? I mean, you know, it's like kind of makes you balance life out a little bit. So, you know,
you can work yourself to death, and there's still going to be more broken cars, you know, and taking that time, you know, with family and you know, for yourself too. It is important. I'm not good at it. You know, that's something I've been working on myself too, is to try to just like, okay, gotta step away, gotta disconnect. Yeah, these 5 things I need to get done tonight. Do they really need to be done? Is the world going to end if they get done tomorrow or don't get done? And most of the time, the answer is no.
Yeah.
You know?
Even your taxes, man, they'll charge you a little interest. Big deal. Who cares? I mean, you gotta pay it sooner or later. But I mean, you know, like, I got behind on my sales tax. I didn't even realize. I'm like, how did I not send that one check? I thought I had it, and I get a letter from the state. I'm like, oh boy, I better take care of this one now. You know, but it's like, you know, you got to do what you got to do, but also, you know, take some time and, you know, go for a walk. I think I've read it in a couple different books that I've read over the years, and, you know, take a moment and enjoy the sunset. You know, every day the sunsets, and it's beautiful. Most times it's gorgeous.
Yeah, right.
Get out there and check that out, man. I mean, in the wintertime we have no choice. It's 4:30 and it's getting dark, but you know, on these nights, you know, it's 9 o'clock or whatever, or 8 o'clock or whatever. And, you know, take the time and enjoy stuff, and it just makes life better. And I find sometimes taking that break it's a small break, and you really get a lot out of it. You know, I'm thinking, is it here? Well, no, I'm trying to think of where it was. Well, yeah, I got my little quote thing on the wall here. You know, I thought. Think about this. I guess Leonardo da Vinci said this: as a well-spent day brings happy sleep, life well spent brings happy death. So it's like, well, we're all going to go sometime, but what can you do to, you know, make it good the time you have? I mean, I think it's awesome to have a career that is fun. I mean, you know. Do I think it's fun when I get my tail handed to me? No. You know, I get frustrated, and, you know, I think I'm probably human like everybody else. I kind of like, man, what am I missing here? I'm missing something obvious. But when I finally get it and it clicks, and then the ability to try and share it with other people or talk about it, you know, and just learn, that's fun. I mean, I think it's spending my life in a good way, but also there's other things in life, you know. Yeah,
it gives you purpose, you know, the career, and that's an important thing for everyone, is to have, you know, purpose in their life. And I know it does for me, but then I have to weigh it too with, okay, if I fix, you know, 7 cars today, or I fix 5, like, am I going to remember that, you know, 40 years from now? I'm not, you know.
Nope.
And so maybe I will remember a really good time with my friends or family, you know, during that period. And so, okay, let's try to you know, limit the amount that cars dominates my life.
I think Ben Vernadoe, I think that's how you say his name. He really talked on one of the, I think it might have been somebody else's. That might have been the Roundtable Diagnostics or somewhere else. And he really talked about just how, you know, we got to, you know, getting burned out can really take its toll on you. I mean, big time. It can just speed you up. And
it comes to everybody too. You can grind, but like nobody's getting younger. And boy, that burnout, it'll creep up on you. And then things are even worse because you don't want to do what you're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a fact. And not wanting to do what you're doing, or, you know, this goes for anybody out there, is like, don't isolate yourself. If things are tough, I mean, I'm pretty confident many of the people who listen to this podcast have other people at their shop they can probably just confide in, or Facebook people that, hey, I don't really know you, but whatever. Or if you get out to any of the big training events, there's people that you'll meet, and it's just pretty cool because now you got a family of people that probably can actually walk alongside you and say, yeah, dude, you are burned out. What are you doing? Take a step back. And, you know, it's okay to admit that too. That's a hard thing. I mean, that's probably one of the harder things for hard-headed people, especially, I guess, the older the generation, you know, we're brought up a little different than now, maybe. I'm not sure about how that works, but it's like, no, we can't say we're weak. That's unacceptable. Fix the car. Just get the car fixed. And it doesn't stop. But, yeah, man, I'm glad to hear you got something going on to get your mind off of the work stuff, because it's like it's challenging when you like what you do. I mean, that's the thing.
That's the trap.
It's a huge trap. I mean, if my wife was here, she'd come down and tell you, man. She'd be like, "Yep, that's a trap." He likes his business so much, blah blah blah, and it's like. It's like I didn't take time off for a long time when I started, and then this year's all jacked up because with her situation and many appointments and me taking time off, it's like, well, I guess my vacation this year might be Super Saturday. So I'm going to get there for sure. And is that a vacation? I don't know. It's a break. It's a break. It's refreshing, but
it is refreshing. I haven't been on a legit vacation since pre-COVID. Like, I've gone places and mostly to training events, and so those have kind of been my like vacation, which is ridiculous. But yeah, I need. I'm actually planning something in September. So
good.
Yeah.
Good.
So
awesome, man.
Get away from it. Yeah.
Well. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, are we running short or long for your program here? I enjoy talking.
Oh, no, we're good. I mean, hey, on this, topic, we could definitely wrap this thing up so both of us could enjoy part of the evening. So,
perfect timing. And, Sean, once again, thanks a lot for just taking the time to talk to me. I hope that it's good enough for your show, but thanks for what you do, because I think a lot of people really get a lot out of the information you share. So that's awesome.
Well, thank you. And I'm really happy to know that you're doing good and your wife's doing good. And
thank you. Yeah.
So, but yeah, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Have a good night.
All right. That's going to do it for today's episode. Another big thank you to Brian for spending some time with me this evening. Also like to thank everybody out there for listening and all the feedback I get on the show. Always appreciate that. But with that all out of the way, let's get out there, start fixing the world one car at a time.